Hey team, I wanted to go over a couple of things regarding purchase orders and dropship inventory because it does relate really well to the invoices that we do and making sure that we're completing those properly. And Sawin does sometimes do some weird things with the purchase order line items that we have to watch out for. So this is just a little bit of advanced training with Sawin and with purchase orders and dropship inventory. So first, I just want to make sure we know how to create a purchase order and why we do that. So I'm going to use this call here as an example. To create a PO, we would just right-click the call, click Create PO. Then we're going to enter the vendor, wherever the technician's going. I'm just going to make one up right now. And we'll say it was Devin who asked for the PO. So I've got the vendor here. You can also search for the vendor with the magnifying glass. Just enter the name, any other information you might have. The buyer goes here, that's Devin. Most of this other stuff is going to be defaulted in here for you. If not, the only ones you'll probably have to change would be ship, via, and freight type. And those are always just going to be default in case that ever comes up. You may also run into where the FOB is not listed here, and it's always going to be origination. FOB stands for free on board, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone at our company, but basically it just states when title passes on the merchandise. So origination means it passes whenever the technician picks up the goods. Destination means it would not pass until we receive the goods. So don't worry about that. It's technical and you don't really need to know. We choose the division here. We're going to say this is for plumbing. And then we go down to this box here. It's asking, is this an inventory item? And no, it's not. So the reason we create the purchase order is because the technician is purchasing merchandise that we are not recording in our inventory. He's not bringing it back here, and we're not recording it in the warehouse and saying, okay, now we own this part. We're not saying that. So we need to have some way to connect those parts to a service ticket. Otherwise, the technician could just take the goods and nobody would ever know about it. So we have to have some kind of a way to track that. So this is not an inventory item. So there won't be a part number. Normally in the past here, we've always just put the date that the technician went, so I would stick with that. That's a good way to keep going here. Next, we have the description, and here we put the vendor. So we're going to say Star or Star Lumber, however you want to do it. And normally we'll put the PO number behind that. Now we don't have the PO number yet, so we'll leave that for now. The next box is the warehouse. So it says warehouse, truck, or job. Now for almost every PO that you create, the warehouse is actually going to be DS, which stands for dropship. The only other time you would use that is if you were doing inventory POs, which you don't have to worry about. So we'll put DS in here, that stands for dropship. That'll be on all your POs. Now this account drop box is the most important part. We have to make sure that the correct account is listed, and we're going to work with Sawin to try and see if they can automate that based on whatever division we pick. But you'll see it defaults to dropship, but division 00. And we don't want that. We don't ever want anything going to division 00, because that division is set aside for any kind of expenses that are not attributable to a specific division, like plumbing or electrical. So some of our general and administrative expenses go there. So we don't ever want anything to go there that's tied to a job. So we're going to go down to where we see dropship plumbing. And you'll see that's 1405-50. So we're going to choose that. And now if we save, it'll ask if we want to create the new PO. We say yes here. Do you want to enter receiving? And no, we don't want to do that yet. But then we do now have a PO number that we can add to our description. This isn't absolutely necessary, but it does help when we are reconciling the dropship account in the accounting office. So it's helpful to put the vendor and then the PO number here. So we're going to save that. And then we would email that PO number to the technician. And he'll give that to, in this case, Star Lumber, and tell them that's the PO number. And when we receive the invoice from Star Lumber, it would have that PO number so we can close everything out. So that's how we create the PO, and it's tied to this specific service job. So I'm going to act like we received the invoice from Star. Oh, I don't need that. And we'll say it was for $20. So you want to put that in the, it's actually the standard or last cost field. And that's this first number box here. So we're going to say it's $20 and hit tab. And that should automatically calculate the net unit cost and the extended amount. So we're saying we ordered, there was one invoice for $20. If the invoice was $500, we would put 500. We don't change this ordered number because it's always going to be a one unit of $20 in this case. So then we would click save. It will ask if we want to enter receiving, and we'll say yes this time. Now normally you probably won't ever use partial receiving unless you move into the accounting office and work on those accounts payable invoices. So just always remember we're going to do full receiving 99% of the time. So we'll click full receiving and click OK. And we see the receiving date is automatically the date that we start receiving this purchase order. You just want to make sure that that matches whatever date is on the invoice, and most likely it's going to be the same day. So we'll leave that. We don't need to change anything else here, so we'll click save again. Now this will permanently update all information, and we'll say yes. All the quantities have been received now for this PO. And it asks, do you want to close the PO? And yes, we do. So the receiving was created. Now what this does, it requires a little bit of accounting knowledge, but you don't have to necessarily know all of this. I think it's helpful in explaining how everything works though. So these are our T accounts. All this is a graphical representation of accounts that exist on our balance sheet and on our income statement. So the left side it will be debits, the right side is credits. All you really need to know, this is the dropship account here, 1405, is that debits will increase this account and credits will decrease this account. Now the opposite is true for this accrued purchases, is what this 2120 is. A debit will decrease this account and a credit will increase this account. You don't necessarily have to make sense of all that right now, but I'll show you how this works. So when we received that PO for $20, we put $20 into our dropship account. So now that's a debit over here. And that increases this account by $20. Now the 1405 account is just a temporary place to hold that amount or that inventory because we're not actually recording that as inventory on our financial statements. So we have to have somewhere to put it. And so 1405 is just a temporary account that holds that amount. Now when we do the service tickets, so we're going to go into this ticket here. We'll see the RPO. If you've ever done a ticket where the PO wasn't already pulled in, you'll see that it's asking you if you want to include those parts. And yes, we do want to include those because we're going to assume the technician bought these parts on this job. So we'll say yes there, and then we'll save and make sure the status is set to closed for the PO. And so you guys know that this brings in that purchase order. We're going to make up a sales amount. Usually we double the parts, so we'll just say that's $40. But the important thing about the purchase orders on invoices is this cost offset account down here. Now normally this is going to say 1405, that will be the default, and that's what we want. But I do want to show you one thing that happens with Sawin right now that we're trying to get them to fix. Let's say that this was actually a sewer call. So we're going to change this line item to sewer. Now when we do that, for some reason Sawin is throwing this back to 1400. And that's not what we want, because then we're saying that we're pulling this material from our inventory, and we aren't. We're pulling this material from, in this case, Star Lumber. So then we would have to change this back to 1405. Okay, so that's just something to watch out for on the purchase order line items, especially if you're changing any of the service types. It's going to throw that back to 1400, which will result in an error on the financial statements. So we're going to change this to 1405. Okay, so once we're done with this ticket and we approve the ticket and I post it, that's going to do something to this 1405 account that we were looking at before. And actually, originally, the 20 that went into the 1405 also went into the accrued purchases, but don't pay attention to this account too much. So when we post the service ticket, it's what that's telling the system to do is to pull that amount out of the 1405 account. So this was our first scenario when we pulled the purchase order, and this is when we post the service ticket. So we've already got this $20 that's sitting in here from before. When we post the ticket, it puts $20 on this side. And so that results in a balance in this account of 0. And that's what we want. So it went in for $20, and then it went out for $20, and we ended up with 0. And that's exactly how we want it to work. It also records revenue. This is material revenue of $40. That was our sales amount. And material cost, it was $20. These are income statement accounts. So those are correct. We don't want those to be 0. Of course, we want to show a positive balance in our sales, material sales account, saying that we've sold a bunch of material. That's a good thing. And this is our material costs, what it costs us to purchase the materials. But the important thing to look at is this 1405 account. We want that to be 0, theoretically, at the end of every period, because we don't want to have a bunch of inventory that's sitting out theoretically on a technician's truck and not on a job, not a job that we've completed. So that's the important thing about that 1405 account. And this just kind of explains how that works through the system when you create a purchase order and when we post these service tickets. Now, if we had left that cost offset account in this service ticket, if we had left this at 1400, then this right here would not have happened, because when we post the service ticket and that says 1400, then it's actually pulling that $20 from this account. And we know that that's incorrect because those parts did not come from our inventory. So then we've got this error that would be sitting in our inventory account, and then we would have this $20 sitting in our dropship account that had nowhere to go, and it would just be stuck there. So that's why we do go through the dropship account every month and we reconcile it and make sure any errors are corrected, so that we would theoretically have a balance of 0 in that account. Now when we go into different periods at the end of a month, there could possibly still be material in the 1405 account and we don't have the ticket done yet. So in real life that wouldn't be 0, but theoretically this should 0 out. And that's just a basic explanation of the purchase order system and the dropship inventory. You don't have to necessarily understand all of the T accounting or anything like that, but just understand that the line items for purchase orders on service tickets, we have to make sure that this always says dropship, if it is a true dropship purchase order, which 100% of the time really it's going to be. So watch out for that when you're doing your tickets. And that is all for this one.